Good morning, students. Why so sad?
I have a question on our subject. Good morning, sir.
What is the question, my dear student?
Can sir explain on a brief history of counseling, sir?
To understand the history of counseling, we begin with the realization that throughout the years, human beings have found comfort in sharing their problems or telling their story to others.
Can sir explain in detail on it, sir?
Sure. Why not? Hi, children. Now I explain more on history of counseling. The old saying, "A problem shared is a problem halved," tells us one universal human truth, that when things get difficult or we have to make decisions in our life, sometimes we need someone to listen and hear our story so we can get a better idea of our options.
When it was started, sir?
Counseling history can be traced back to tribal times where people would came together in a group and share their experiences and sometimes their dreams.
Really?
As civilization developed, religion offered a type of counseling, usually by priests who would listen and advise parishioners on their problems. They still do. In the 1890s, German neurologist Sigmund Freud developed a theory later to be called psychoanalysis, which allowed individuals to tell their problems to a psychoanalyst, an individual trained in interpreting the subconscious, that part of our psyche that we are not aware of but influences what we do. Freud played an important part in the history of counseling, but the actual word counseling did not come into everyday language until the 1960s. More detail will be discussed later during our annual school dinner. Student. Hi, Taruni.
Hi, sir.
I will explain more on it now.
Sure, sir. Why not?
Counseling really took off after the Second World War, in 1950s America.
Okay.
Most of the therapies we hear about today can trace their origins back to a handful of psychologists and psychiatrists, some of whom we will look at in this guide, who developed techniques and theories, sometimes referred to as schools of therapy. In education, this time period saw the ongoing development of progressive education led by John Dewey. The focus of this movement was child learning through real-world experience and an emphasis on schools reflecting the overall life of society.
Really? Is something different? I haven't get to know.
The word school in counseling does not mean a building or campus. Rather, it refers to how psychologists believe human beings develop their view of the world they live in and how they cope with it. The three schools are psychoanalytical, behaviorist, and humanistic. Also part of this movement was respect for the child and the implementation of a curriculum that allowed for children to develop personal interests. This curriculum included agricultural education, industrial education, and social education with an emphasis on the acculturation of immigrants.
Okay, sir. Carry on.
There have been many developments in counseling since the 1950s. A lot of research has taken place, and this has given us a better understanding of what makes human beings think and act in certain ways. However, most psychologists and counselors would agree that we are a long way from fully understanding what makes each human being unique. Progressive education coupled with the humanistic movement shed light on the growing need to attend to the overall well-being of children, beyond the walls of the school. Another key figure in the change of American schools was Horace Mann, who is often referred to as the father of American education. Mann believed in the development of a system of common schools, universal, free, and non-sectarian education. It is worth considering that counseling has rapidly developed since Freud's time, with new ideas and approaches emerging from the late 1800s to the present day. Progressive education coupled with the humanistic movement shed light on the growing need to attend to the overall well-being of children, beyond the walls of the school. Another key figure in the change of American schools was Horace Mann, who is often referred to as the father of American education. Mann believed in the development of a system of common schools, universal, free, and non-sectarian education.
Thank you so much, sir, for the explanation, sir. I'm clear enough, sir.
No problem. I'm to guide you, my students. Let's have some good dinner. Taruni.
Yeah. Sure, sir. How was your dinner with lectures, Mom? It was so nice and I learned more about history of counseling. I'm so happy, Mom. Really, and what you learn and share knowledge with me too. Dear daughter. Mom. The history of counseling field, though relatively new, is rich. It is important to know the influence of the broad field of psychology, and though much of the history of each is unique, counseling and psychology are branches of the same mental health tree. Tell me more on it. My dear daughter. My dear mom. The counseling field developed from the guidance movement in response to recognition of a need for mental health and guidance counseling for individuals facing developmental milestones. The early 1900s saw the beginning of political support for compulsory education. Compulsory education allowed for education for all and is based on the fundamental principle that education is a basic human right. Specifically, compulsory education requires by law that children receive education and that government provide education to all. The counseling profession developed in many ways from responses to changes in society. In the early 20th century, when counseling was first emerging, humanistic reform, with an increased emphasis on the value of all human beings, was also emerging. Wow! You really learned well from your lecturer. I'm so proud of you, my child. I'm going to sleep. Good night, daughter. Good night, mom. Hey guys. Concurrently, the school system was taking a lead in this transformation through its focus on humanistic education, including student-centered learning with the teacher as a facilitator, development of the self-actualized student, and student cooperation. Humanistic reform led to a new way of viewing the individual and the facilitation of human well-being. Educating children decreased the number of children in the labor force and was a primary force in the change of society. That's for now. Have a good day and good night, guys.